Hello, this will be I'm going to do an Alex practice exam 3. So this is Alex exam 3. So let's just begin. Okay. Question 1 says, if a jack if a jacket originally costs $150 and then there's a 20% discount, what should the final price of the jacket be? So you could do this problem two ways. One way is you could just take 20% of 150. So if I do that, so let me show you the first, so that you could do the two ways. One, you could first find 20% of 150. If the jacket originally cost 150 and there's a 20% discount, what should it be the final price? So it's going to be less than 150. So what is 20% of 150? It would be 0.20 means 150, and then that equals to 30. But that is not our answer. It's 30, it's a discount off, so you're going to do 150 minus 30. That is your final price. So that is $120. Okay. So C. Now, what's the other way you could do this? You could set it up as an equation. You could do 100% minus 20%. And then I believe it's going to be X, which represent the new price, the final price, and then it's going to equal to their original cost, 150. So let's see if we really do get 120. So this is going to be X. And then what's 100 minus 20%? 80%. Now, then what you want to do is convert that 80% into a decimal. How do I do that? It's just X, and then 80% would be, as a decimal, all you got to do is move it two places to the left. Two, so that'd be 0.80. And then this is going to be 0.80x equals to 150. And then divide this by 0.80. And you get x 150 divided by 0.80. That is wrong. I got 180. I did this wrong. What I think what you did, what I was supposed to do is, so it's going to be still 100 minus 20 because there's a 20% discount. And then I believe you're going to times it by your original cost, 150, and then X will be so X will be the final price. And then you're going to times this by the original cost. So this is going to be 150. 100% minus 20% is 80% equals to X. And that's all we got to do. So 150. And then what's 80% as a decimal? Move it 0.8 two places to the left. That equals X. And then X is going to be, do you put that in the calculator? 180, 150 times 180. And it gives you 120, which is our final price. Okay. Honestly, I think this way is easier. Just take 20% of 150 and then subtract it by the original cost of 150. Solve for X. So here we have a right triangle and we got to solve for X. But there's two ways you could do this. I just realized you could do two ways. Do you see these two tick marks? I don't know if you can see this, but you have these two tick marks, right? What that means is these two angles are congruent. And there's two ways you could do this. Because these two tick marks are congruent, that means that this leg is X, this length is X, and that this leg is also congruent with this leg because of these congruent tick marks. So you technically can use Pythagorean theorem because it's a right triangle, and now we know the other side length, which is x. Let's see if let's try that. So what is Pythagorean theorem? A squared plus b squared equals c squared. A is a leg, which is x squared, and then b is also a leg, and then c is the hypotenuse, x squared plus x squared. 20 squared is 400. And then x squared plus x squared is 2x squared. Divide this by 2. Just 200. And then you would take the square root of both sides. And as you can see, you can simplify this because you don't see square root of 200, right? What two numbers multiply 200? So how do you simplify radicals that are non-perfect? It's easy. So what two numbers multiply 200? It would be 100 times 2. 2 is prime, and then 100 is not prime. It could be broken down as 10 and 10. And then what you do is you circle pairs of the pair of your prime numbers. So this 10 and 10 is a pair, so that just becomes 10. 10, you put it outside, and then inside is your leftover prime number, which is 2. Okay. Now, what is the other way? Um, so it is B. The other way is you could use a 45, 45, 90 right triangle. And how do I know these are 45? Well, if these two angles are congruent and this is a 90, this has to be 45 and 45, right? So you technically can use the 45, 45 triangle rule. That's another way. So let me show you. So then you have a right triangle. Here's a 90, here's 45, here's 45. And the rule states, look at my notes, I feel I forget to. Here we are. So on my notes, this is the rule for 45, 45. This is going to be x, this is going to be x, and then the hypotenuse is x radical 2. So what you do is look at this rule very carefully and figure out what you have. The only side length we have is 20, which is the hypotenuse. And then the hypotenuse, according to the rule, is x radical 2. So what we could do is set 20 equals to x radical 2. Okay. And then we can solve for x by getting rid of this radical 2 by dividing both sides by radical 2, right? So you get x equals 20 over radical 2. And then what you could do is rationalize the denominator by multiplying top and bottom by radical 2. So you get 20 radical 2 over radical 2, or not radical. What's radical 2 times radical 2 just becomes regular 2, and then 20 divided by 2 is 10, and then you still have that radical 2 on the top. Okay, so just be okay. Question 3. We're subtracting fraction, and the good news about this problem is see how the bottoms are the same, x plus 1 square, x plus 1 square. So when you subtract or add fractions, you need an LCD. And the good news is they're the same, so that means our LCD is x plus 1 squared. So on the bottom, you can just put down your LCD, which is x plus 1 squared. And then all you got to do is fix the numerator. So unfortunately, we have this minus. So what you could do with this, you do have to FOIL out this minus or this invisible -1. So it would be -1, right? Negative times 1 is -1. Negative times -2x is positive 2x. And then this stays the same. Okay. Clean up the numerator. So on the numerator, what cancels the 2x and the -2x? So you're left with x squared minus 1. And then on the bottom, it's parentheses x plus 1 squared. Now, do you see our answer? No, because they factored it out and canceled stuff. So what can you factor? Well, the only thing I could think of is the numerator, x squared minus 1. That is a perfect square, right? That factors out as x plus 1 times x minus 1. And then on the bottom, we have x plus 1 all raised to the second square. What you could do is you can rewrite it. That 2 means repeat twice. So you could say x plus 1 times x plus 1. And now do you see anything that cancels? Yes. I am left with x minus 1 over x plus 1. Simplify the fourth root of 240. So I know it's not a perfect root. If you want to make sure if it's a perfect, like, I mean, it's not, but you can also rewrite this as 240 raised to the 1/4, right? And as you can see, you get a decimal. You like it, it's like 3.93. So you can technically test each one and figure out if it gives you a decimal 3.93, or you can simplify it. So what you could do is, how do you simplify this? Is make a factor tree. So what two numbers multiply 240? It could be any number you like. It could be 24 and 10. And then circle your prime numbers. So what is a prime number? It's a number that can be times by 1 itself. So 10 is not prime. It could be broken down as 5 and 2. 2 is prime, 5 is prime. 24 is not prime. It could be broken down as 6 and 4. 4 could be broken down as 2 and 2. 6 could be broken down as 3 and 2. Okay. And what we do is we only care about our prime numbers. So you see the numbers I circled? Those are prime numbers, and those are the only thing we care about. And then what we do is, do you see this 4 here? You circle pairs of 4. So not the number 4, but like a pair in general of your prime numbers. So do you see a pair of 4 of your prime numbers? Yes. I see these twos here, right? Do you see that? Two, 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 two. There's 4 of them. So that's a pair of 4. So what happens is that these two, 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 these two, 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 and two becomes 2. And then you put it outside the radical, and then inside is your leftover prime numbers. So what are we left over? We're left with 3 and 5, which is 15. So your final answer is 2, 4, 3, 15. Okay, that would be letter D. Okay, question 5, we have some kind of factoring rule. So factoring, we have this rational function, x squared plus 4x plus 25. And then somehow we are supposed to simplify it. Um, so this is what we're gonna do. Can we factor this at all? So look at the numerator, x squared plus 4x plus 25. I don't think we can factor this. I can't, this is why it cannot be factored. So you're gonna put an x here and x here. So can you come up with two numbers that are multiply 25 and when added gives you 4? Impossible, right? So what can we do? What we could do is we could do two things. We could do synthetic division, and we could do long division. Those are our two options. So I'll try synthetic. So sometimes synthetic doesn't always work. With a synthetic, whatever you're dividing must be linear. If it's not linear, you can't do synthetic, right? So look at the bottom, x plus 1. Is that linear? Linear. Yes, it is linear because it has a power of 1 Highest power is 1, right? And then what you're going to do is, so we're going to do synthetic. And what we're going to do is, if x plus 1 is a factor, what would be the solution? -1. And then what we got to do is look at the numerator and make sure everything's in order. Are we missing any powers? We have an x squared, an x1, and a constant. Nothing's missing. Then what we do is only use the coefficient. So starting with the highest power, x2, what is the coefficient? 1. And then this this x1 has a coefficient of 4, and then the constant. Okay? The horizontal line over, and then put a placeholder always on the first number. So put a placeholder under put a placeholder 0 under 1, and then add them up vertically. So what's 1 plus 0? 1. What's 1 times -1? -1. And then add them up vertically. So what's 4 plus -1 or 4 minus 1? 3. What's 3 times -1? -3. Add them up vertically. What's 25 minus 3? 22. And what happens is 22 is what's called our remainder. So yeah, we have a remainder because x plus 1 is not a factor. So what do we do? What do we do with these numbers? What do I do with the 1? What do I do with the 3? And what do I do with the 22? So what you're going to do is somehow come up with an equation. So 1 and 3 is our coefficient of our new equation. So it's going to be 1x, and then the power is not going to be 2. It's always 1 less from the highest power. So our original highest power was 2. So we're going to go 1 less, and then it's going to be plus 3. And then do you see the remainder 22? So what you do is you're going to do your remainder, which is 22, divided by whatever you were dividing originally, which was x plus 1. Okay, that is how you do synthetic. That is our answer, x plus 3 plus 22 over x plus 1. So C. Okay, question 6 is a word problem. George finds that the number of friends in his social life varies inversely with the amount of math he learns. After finishing his first course, he had 60 friends. How many friends will he have on his third course? So this is a variation problem. And what you need to know is when you hear the word varies inversely, you need to know that's related to an equation. And that is why when it says varies inversely, it comes from the equation y equals k over x, I believe. Let me double check. Yes. So when you hear the word varies inversely, it's y equals k over x. And what you need to do is what you're gonna do is first solve for k. That's the first thing what you're gonna do. So you gotta solve for k. They give you like coordinates. You gotta figure out your x and your y. So they don't tell you straight up what so sometimes they will tell you an x coordinate of 3 and an x coordinate of 2, right? But we have to figure it out. So what do you think our x is? So I believe our x is going to be our course number. And then what do you think our y is going to be? It's going to be the amount of friends. Okay? So that's the other thing you have to do. You have to figure out what is your x and what is your y. So what would be our x and our y for our first one? So it says George finds that his number of friends in his social life varies inversely with the amount of math he learns. After finishing his first course, so that is a clue that our x is 1. He had 60 friends. So that another clue that is our y value, which is 60. So now we can figure out our k. So I'm going to plug in my y and my x into this equation. My y is 60 Don't know what my k is. That's what I want to find. And my x is 1. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and cross multiply. So 1 times k is k. And then 1 times 60 is 60. Okay. So my k is 60. But that is not our answer. They're asking you how many friends will he have in his third course? So how many friends represents our y value? So what we're trying to do is figure out our y value. So what we're going to do is use this same equation, right? But the only difference is we're going to replace our k with 60 because we just found it. And then what else are we going to replace? So how many friends will we have after his third course? So x is our third. So that means we're going to replace our x with 3. So what's 60 over 3? 20. So letter D. Okay. So yeah, this one's a variation problem. So what you need to know is that you have to use this formula because it says varies inversely. Then you got to figure out your k value, then figure out your x and y and figure out if they gave it to you, and then figure out what are you trying to find, the x or the y value. Okay. Question 7 says, what is the equation of the line that passes through the points 3, 2, and 7, -5? So if you look at all our answers, A, B, C, D, they're all linear and slope, point slope or slope intercept form. So they're all in the form of y equals mx plus b, right? And what we got to do is find our m and we got to find our b. Unfortunately, we don't have any of that. We don't even have a b. Sometimes they give it to you. They only give us 2 points, 3, 2, and 7, -5. So what I'm going to do is find my slope by using that slope formula. Okay, so this is going to be x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay, so once I label that so I don't get confused. So what is my y2? It is -5 minus my y1, which is 2. And then my x2 is 7 minus my x1 is 3. So -5 minus 2 is -7. 7 minus 3 is 4. So that is my slope. So my slope is -7/4. Now how to find my b? So what you're going to do is kind of set it up. Y equals -7/4 x plus b. So you can definitely eliminate b and d because they don't have the slope of -7/4. So to find the b, what you're going to do is plug in a point that you have. It doesn't matter which one you use. So if I use the point 3, 2, I'm going to replace my y with 2. And then I'm going to replace my x with 3. So you get 2 equals -7 times 3 is -21 over 4 plus b. And then I'm going to get rid of the fraction by multiplying everything by 4. So 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times -21/4 is -21. 4 times b is 4b. Okay, continue solving for b by adding 21, 21, 21 plus 8 is 29. Divide this by 4 equals 29/4. So my final answer will be -7/4 x, and b is 29/4. Okay, letter A. Okay, question 8. What is the area of a triangle below? So what you need to know for this problem is the area formula. So the area of a triangle, it doesn't matter if it's a right or non-right. It's base times height over 2. And we are lucky we have everything we need. My base is this horizontal distance, which is 15. My height is 20, and then it's all of 2. So 15 times 20 divided by 2 is 150. So B. Okay, 20, number question 9. So we have multiplied fractions. So when you're multiplying fractions, you just cross up cross, multiply across, do not crisscross. You only crisscross if you're dividing, right? Multiply across, so what's 21 times 3? It is 63. And then what's 50 times 7? 350. And I think that's it. I don't think it can be reduced. Yeah, yeah, that's it. Okay, this one, what is the domain of this graph? So we have f of x equals square root of x minus 3 squared plus 1. Now, I know you're seeing a square root, and when you're dealing with square root, for example, y equals, I don't know, 3x, 3x plus 1. What you would do if it's a regular square root, you would just say whatever is inside the parentheses or inside the square root would be 3. For in this case, it would be 3x plus 1. And then what you do is to find the domain, you set it greater than equal to 0, and then you solve for x. But the thing is, inside under the radical, what is this graph? It's a square, it's a quadratic, right? And what is the domain of a quadratic? Um, it's all real numbers. So even though this is a square root, it's still quadratic, so the domain is all real numbers. Letter B. Question 11, if f of x equals 2x plus 3 and g of x equals x squared plus 7, which of the following represents the composition G Goff? So this is a composition problem. This is not multiplication. So what you got to do is start on the right hand and then make your way to the left. So what that means is we're going to start on f of x and then we're going to move it to put that inside g. So what we're going to do is here's f of x. You're going to put that inside of g of x, if that makes sense. So what that means is we're going to use the function g of x, and then we're going to replace x, wherever you see next, we're going to replace that with 2x plus 3. And then you got to square that, and then you still have that plus 7. So, and then you simplify it. What is 2x plus 3 squared? You could do the long way. 2x plus 3 squared is the same thing as 2x plus 3 times 2x plus 3, right? And then you would FOIL this out carefully. So this would be 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times 3 is 6x. 3 times 2x is 6x. 3 times 3 is 9. And then that simplifies as 4x squared. 6x plus 6x is 12x plus 9. And then don't forget that plus 7 at the very end. So when you simplify this, it's going to be 4x squared plus 12x And then 9 plus 7 is 16. Do you see our answer? Not yet, because then they factor out a 4, so that's going to be 4x squared plus 3x plus 4. Now I see my answer because I don't think this could be factored, right? So it is letter D. Question 12. Solve the following equation. We have log of x squared plus 9 equals 2. So what you need to know about this problem is you got to use the rule that you have it in log form, you got to put in the power form. So basically you got to put a to the y equals x. And the a represents the base. So do we see our base? Not yet. So there's no number here. So if you have no number under the log, that means our base is 10. And then my y is always on the left or right side of the equal sign, so my y is 2. And then my x is like the parentheses, is usually inside the parentheses, so it's x squared plus 19. Okay, so once you have that, a is 10, y is 2, and x is x squared plus 9. Put that in the formula and you're fine. So a is 10, y is 2, and then x is x squared plus 19. Okay, 10 squared is 100 equals x squared plus 19. Solve for x, so you're going to subtract 19 from both sides. The 100 minus 19 is 81 equals x squared, and then take the square root. You get x equals square root of 81 is 9 and negative 9. Now, can we use negative 9? Yes, as long as this doesn't turn out to be negative. So what I'm saying is you can't have like a log of negative 5, right? And if you plug in negative 9, the reason why this works is because negative 9 squared is positive, and then plus 19, that works. So that's why both answers works. Letter B. Which of the following represents the solutions of the linear inequality? So this one is graphing inequality. So what you got to do is, um, we have y is greater than 1/3 x plus 10/3. Is there anything we can eliminate immediately? Let me see. So they all have that dashed line, so we can't eliminate any of these. So right now, but what do we know about this? So if you want, you could say y equals 1/3 x plus 10/3. Um, 10/3 is your y-intercept, which is like 3.3. So which one can we now we can eliminate some. So our slope is 1/3 and it's positive 1/3, so it's going to the right. So is it this one? Does that this looks like it has a y-intercept of 3.3 and a slope positive 1/3, so maybe. What about B? Yes, it has a y-intercept of 3.3 and a slope of positive 1/3. Okay, so we can do that. C, no. The reason why we can forget about C is because the slope is negative. The same with D. The slope is negative. So we can eliminate C and D. So our only choice is A or B. So what you got to do to do the correct shading is what I'm going to do is pick a point, any point, as long as it doesn't pick a point, it doesn't matter which point, as long as it does not cross the line. Okay. So I always recommend using the point 0, 0 because it's easy. So I'm going to use that point because as you can see, it does not go through the origin. So what I'm going to do next is here's your x, here's your y. I'm going to plug it back into the inequality. So replace, here, I'll show you. replace my y with 0, and then replace my x with 0. And then figure out if this statement is true. So this is 0 greater than, and then 10 over 3 is 3.3. Is this statement true or false? So if you put it on an underline, 3.3 is like right here, here is 0. Is 0 greater than 10.3? That is false. So what you're going to do is you're going to shade on the other side of 0 of the point 0, 0. So it's not A anymore. It has to be B because here's the point 0, 0. It's false, so you're going to have to shade it the other side. So that's why it is B. Okay, question 14. Uh, Question 14 says, what is the angle? Um, we got to find this unknown theta. So we can't just use subtract 180. The reason why we can't do that is because we need to figure out this angle first. So let's go and figure out that angle. So how do I figure out this angle? Well, they said that this angle here is 13.1. So, and then this is a straight line, or it's also known as supplementary. So anything that's supplementary or straight line is equal to 180. So to find this missing angle, all you're going to do is do 180 minus 130.1. And that gives me 49.9. Okay, so this missing angle is 49.9. And then I'm going to figure out this angle. So to do so is just do 180 minus 62.5 minus 49.9. And I get 67.6. Okay, that's how you find that angle. Okay, question 15. So we have the cube root of 8x squared y fourth times the fifth root of x cubed y cubed. If you look at all the choices, notice that the powers are fractions, so there's no radicals, right? So what we could do is we cannot combine this because this is the cube root and this is the fifth root. If they were both cube roots or if they were both fifth roots, then we can simplify them. But instead, no. So what I would do is rewrite it as an exponent. So let's start with here. Let's start with the cube root of 8x squared y fourth. I can rewrite that as 8x squared y to the fourth raised to the 1/3, right? The same thing here. The fifth root of x cubed y cubed is the same thing as x cubed y cubed raised to the 1/5. Then we just simplify. So what is the rule for raising? So if you, for example, if you had x3 raised to the second power, that's going to be x6 because when you raise, you multiply, right? So you have to raise everything to the 1/3, so including the 8. So this has an invisible 1. So 1 times 1/3 is 1/3. And then 2 times 1/3 is 2/3. 4 times 1/3 is 4/3. And then here, 3 times 1/5 is 3/5. 3 times 1/5 is 3/5. And then simplify it. What's 8 to the 1/3? That is the cube. That's the same thing as cube root of 8, which is 2. So you have 2x to the 2/3, y to the 4/3, and then times it by x to the 3/5, y to the 3/5. Then simplify. So now we are multiplying with exponents. So what is the rule when you're multiplying exponents? For example, what is x5 times x2? It is x7 because when you multiply, you add the power, right? So it's going to be 2 because we solved this 2. And then what's 2/3? So the x and 2/3 times x to 3/5, you're adding. So 2/3 plus 3/5. Darn, we need an LCD, which is 15. So we're going to multiply this by 3. So that's going to be 15 bottom. 5 times 2 is 10. 3 times 3 is 9. So that's 19 over 15. And then do the same thing with the y's. So you have 4/3 plus 3/5. LCD is 15, so multiply this by 3. Multiply this by 5. That's 29 over 15. So it looks like B, right? 2x 19 over 15 and then 29 over 15. Question 6, which of the following graphs represents the function f of x equals e raised to the 6x minus 3? So what we need to know is this is an exponential. The reason why is because it's in the form of y equals a raised to the x. And I also know this is a growth or exponential growth. Why? Is because the base is greater than 1. What is our base? Our base is actually e, which is a technically a number. It's like 2.7, right? So I know it's a growth. And then the 6x minus 3. So what does an exponential growth look like? It usually looks like this. It usually has a y-ness of 0, 1, and then like that. Okay, and then what we got to do is, what else do we know? That 6x minus 3 is a x, it's a horizontal shift. So you set 6x minus 3 to 0, solve for x, divide this by 6. So it doesn't really change it. We don't have a vertical shift, so our horizontal asymptote is y equals 0. So it's gonna look something similar like this because it's an exponential growth with no vertical shift. So that means our horizontal asymptote is at y equals 0. And so we know it's not going to be A, it's not going to be B, it could be C, cannot be D. So it looks like my only choice is C. Okay, 17. It's just multiplying polynomials. So 3x squared plus 12 times this. So what you need to know is when you're multiplying exponents, for example, x3 times x2, you're technically adding. So x5. So all you got to do is just be very careful and neat. So what is 3x times x squared y? This is like one whole term. It's going to be 3x to the cubed, right? Because 2, this is a 1, so 1 plus 2 is 3. Okay, keep on going. What's 3x times negative 2xy? That is negative 6x. square y. And then what is 3x times 4y? That is going to be 12xy. And then do 12. So what's 12 times x squared? That is going to be 12x squared y. What's 12 times negative 2x squared? Negative 2xy. That is negative 24 xy. And then what's 12 times 4? 48. Okay, clean it up. Or does anything cancel? Uh, the only thing I can combine is this, negative 6x squared and positive 12x squared y, x squared. Why? Because they both have an x squared and a y. So what's 12 minus 6? That's 6x squared y. And then you have this 12xy and negative 24xy. That is going to be negative 12xy. And then you have that 48y. Yep, looks like C. 3x cubed. Oh no, it's not C. You need a y. 3, I think it's A. 3x cubed y plus 6x squared y minus 12xy plus 48y. Okay, question 18. Find the y-intercept of this graph. So how do you find the y-intercept for any graph? You simply plug in 0 for x. So you just do f of 0. Wherever you see an x, plug in 0. So it's going to be 0 plus 2, uh, 0 squared minus 9, and then 0 minus 5. So 0 plus 2 is 2. 0 squared is 0 minus 9 is negative 9. 0 minus 5 is negative 5. So 2 times negative 9 times negative 5 is 90. Okay, so my y-intercept is C, 90. Okay, number 19. We have some kind of order of operation. You see that slanted line? What you could do is just make it horizontal. So if you want to rewrite it as 4, you have the dot means multiplication. 3 plus 2 cubed minus 32 over 2 to the 4th, right? So what you got to do is use order of operation, pandas. So start with our parentheses. Do we have a parentheses? Yes. So do the parentheses first. So what's 3 plus 2? 5. And then what you do is bring down what you haven't done. So just do not do it all in your head. Just bring down what you haven't done. Do it one at a time, right? Okay. But in my parentheses, do we have an exponent? Yes. We have two exponents, I believe. So do that. So what's 5 to the third? 125 minus 32. And then 2 to the fourth is 16. Okay. And then we did the exponent. Do we have a multiplication? Yes. 4 times 125 is 500 minus, and then do we have a division? Yes. 32 over 16 comes out nicely as 2. Lastly, what's 500 minus 2? 498. Okay, I'm gonna stop right here. I gotta uh I'll take and make this in part two.